You slept 8 hours last night. So why does it feel like you haven't slept in 3 days? Here's the thing nobody tells you. Sleep isn't always the problem. And rest? Rest might actually be making it worse. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because by the end of this, you're going to understand something about your exhaustion that most people never figure out. And once you see it, you genuinely cannot unsee it. We're going to talk about the kind of tired that coffee can't fix. The kind that shows up even on vacation. The kind that makes you stare at the ceiling at 9 p.m. thinking, I should not feel this way. And there's a specific reason it keeps happening. But it's not the reason you think. Picture this. A woman, let's call her Maya, has a pretty normal life. She has a job she doesn't hate, a decent apartment, some friends she texts more than she sees. Every Sunday, she promises herself the week ahead will be different. She'll go to bed earlier. She'll eat better. She'll finally feel like herself again. And then Monday comes, and she wakes up already behind, already tired, already dreading something she can't even name. She's not sick. Her blood work is fine. She sleeps sometimes 8 hours. But she is exhausted. Does that sound familiar? Because Maya isn't a real person. But I'd be willing to bet some version of that story lives in your life somewhere. Here's what's actually going on. The human body isn't just tired from physical effort. It's tired from decisions. Every single day, you make thousands of small choices. What to wear? What to say? Whether to respond to that message now or later. Whether to speak up or stay quiet. Whether to eat the thing you want or the thing you think you should want. Each one of those decisions, even the tiny ones, costs something. Psychologists call it decision fatigue, but that phrase doesn't do it justice. It sounds clinical, manageable. What it actually feels like is this. By 3 in the afternoon, you have nothing left. You're not sleepy. Exactly, you're depleted. Like someone quietly drained your battery all day without you noticing. And here's where it gets interesting. The people who feel the most exhausted aren't always the people doing the most work. Sometimes they're doing the least, because the exhaustion isn't coming from effort. It's coming from emotional labor. Think about the last time you had to pretend everything was fine. At work, with family, in a conversation where you smiled and said, I'm good, just tired, and then had to somehow keep functioning for the next 6 hours. That performance, that constant management of how you appear, is one of the most draining things a human being can do, and most of us are doing it on autopilot, all day, every day. Here's a question. When was the last time you were actually alone? Not just physically alone, but fully off? No phone, no mental to-do list, no replaying a conversation from 3 days ago. If you're struggling to remember, that's the answer to a lot of things. Let me tell you about a different kind of exhaustion, one that's harder to spot. Because it doesn't come from what you're doing. It comes from what you're absorbing. There's a concept in psychology called emotional contagion. The phenomenon where you unconsciously sync up with the emotional state of the people around you. You don't choose it. It just happens. You walk into a room where someone is anxious and you leave feeling vaguely on edge, even if nothing bad was said. Now imagine that happening every day with the same person. Maybe it's a coworker who brings their chaos into every meeting. Maybe it's a family member whose mood sets the temperature of every room they walk into. And this one's harder to admit. It's someone you love, who you've been quietly managing the emotional needs of for months or years, without ever giving it a name. This is sometimes called being an emotional sponge. And the exhaustion it creates doesn't look like burnout. It looks like being fine on paper and wrecked underneath. Here's what that looks like in real life. James is a good friend. Genuinely good. He listens, he shows up, he's the person everyone calls when something goes wrong. For years, he thought this was just who he was. Until one day he realized he hadn't had a conversation in months that wasn't about someone else's problem. He'd been so focused on holding space for everyone around him that he never once stopped to ask, who holds space for me? That moment of realization didn't make him selfish. It made him honest. And here's where it gets complicated. Because some of this exhaustion, you might actually be generating yourself without realizing it. We'll come back to that. There's a type of mental fatigue that scientists have started calling ruminative exhaustion. It's the tiredness that comes not from doing things, but from thinking the same things over and over. Your brain, in its default state, doesn't go quiet when you lie down. It reviews, it rehearses, it replays the conversation where you said the wrong thing in 2019. It pre-worries about the email you haven't sent yet. It builds worst-case scenarios and then dismantles them and then builds them again slightly differently. This is called the default mode network. And for people who experience chronic fatigue, this network is often in overdrive. Your brain is never off the clock. So when you rest your body, your mind is still burning fuel. And here's the cruel twist. The more tired you are, the less control you have over this mental loop. Exhaustion makes it harder to redirect your thoughts, which makes you more exhausted, which makes the thoughts louder. Be honest. How many nights have you laid down completely exhausted, then spend the next 2 hours thinking about everything except sleep? That's not insomnia. That's a mind that never learned to close its tabs. Now, remember what I said earlier about how some of this exhaustion you might be creating yourself. Here's what I mean. This one is the hardest to hear. Some exhaustion comes from living a life that doesn't belong to you. Not dramatically, not obviously, but in the accumulation of small compromises. The career path you chose because it made sense, not because it lit you up. The version of yourself you perform for certain people. The dreams you stopped mentioning because it felt easier than explaining them. There's a term in psychology called cognitive dissonance, the discomfort of holding to conflicting beliefs at once. But there's a quieter version of this that rarely gets named. The exhaustion of being someone you're not quite sure you chose to be. It's why some people come back from vacations more tired than when they left. The rest was real. But they came home to the same life, and somewhere underneath the sunburn and the good food, they felt it. This is also why some of the most successful people, by every external measure, describe a bone-deep tiredness that they can't explain to anyone without sounding ungrateful. They're not ungrateful. They're misaligned. And here's the thing about misalignment. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers. Through fatigue, through a vague sense of going through the motions, through the feeling that you're always slightly behind yourself. So, we've talked about decision fatigue, emotional labor, the exhausted mind that never stops running, the quiet cost of being someone slightly different than who you are. But none of that is the deepest layer. And I promised you the deepest layer. Here it is. The real reason you feel exhausted, even when you rest, is that you've been trained to treat rest as something you earn. Think about that for a second. From a very young age, most of us absorbed a message from school, from family, from culture. That rest is a reward for productivity. You rest after you finish. You relax when you deserve it. You take a break once everything is handled. But here's the problem. Everything is never handled. The list never ends. And so the rest you give yourself is always slightly infected with guilt, with the background awareness that you should be doing something, with the low-grade tension of someone who has given themselves permission to stop, but doesn't quite believe they're allowed to. And that tension, that guilt-soaked, should be doing something rest. It doesn't restore you. It just puts you on pause. Real rest requires the complete absence of the feeling that you should be doing something else. Not just the absence of activity, the absence of that voice. The voice that monitors you, even when you're still. The voice that measures your worth in output. That voice is where the exhaustion lives. It's not in your body. It's not in your schedule. It's in the story you've been told and have been telling yourself about what you have to earn before you're allowed to stop. Maya, from the beginning of this video, she eventually figured it out. Not through a new productivity system, not through another supplement or sleep tracker or wellness routine. She figured it out when she stopped asking herself, why am I so tired? And started asking, what am I carrying that was never mine to carry? That's a different question, and it leads somewhere different. You are not tired because you're weak. You're tired because you've been working around the clock at a job nobody hired you for, managing everyone's feelings, running every mental simulation, and apologizing for needing rest in a world that forgot how to give it. The exhaustion isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that you've been treating yourself like a machine. And machines don't need rest. But you're not a machine. If you enjoy content like this, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for watching.